Good evening and thank you for joining us. A 64-year-old man employed by a contractor to the Lac des Îles mine has been killed in an industrial accident. Fatal injuries were sustained while the man was working underground. The palladium mine operated by Impala Canada was fully reopened this week for the first time since shutting down due to a COVID-19 outbreak. Avery McRae has the details.
The tragic incident at the newly reopened mine occurred Wednesday mid-afternoon.
Yesterday after 3 o'clock, we responded to assist the paramedics with a mine incident at the Impala mine on Highway 527. Information was that the male was injured underground, subsequently succumbed to his injuries.
The victim has been identified as 64-year-old Edward Gallant from Dunlop, New Brunswick, an employee with SCR Mining and Tunneling based out of Sudbury. The Ministry of Labour says Gallant was injured in a run of muck, which is an uncontrolled flow of blasted rock. Nearby workers and mine rescue crews responded to the scene. Gallant was transported off-site by Superior North EMS, but he was soon pronounced deceased. Operations in that part of the mine have been suspended and the area has been secured. Impala Canada, the Regional Coroner's Office, and the Ministry are all investigating the tragic incident with help from the OPP.
Just basic forensic information, fact gathering, photographs, video probably is all we have right now.
The Ministry of Labour will also be sending an inspector and engineer to inspect the scene. Impala Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Communications Aaron Satterthwaite released a statement stating, "We are deeply saddened by the most unfortunate accident. Nothing is more important than the health and safety of everyone at Lac des Îles. We extend our deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of the deceased." Satterthwaite also noted that grief counseling is available for both employees and contractors. Avery McRae, TBT News.
With just one active case of COVID-19 in the region and no new cases in the last 6 days, Dr. Stuart Kennedy is changing his tune on how Ontario should be reopened. The local COVID incident manager is now asking the Ford government to grant Thunder Bay special status to open at a faster pace than other parts of the province. Michael Mahorovich reports.
And only having one active case in the community, we should be giving some consideration for some special status that we can begin opening some businesses earlier than Toronto.
With COVID-19 community spread contained, Dr. Stuart Kennedy has shifted his thinking and wants reopenings to happen faster in northwestern Ontario. With just one active case in the region, Kennedy says that in all likelihood, the region will be down to 0 cases in the next few days.
Our prevalence rate for conversion to positivity is 0.9%. The rest of the province is 4.2%. So we've proven that we can actually do our sort of a due diligence and take those precautions. So I will assume the community will continue to take their precautions, but they should actually be given the opportunity to practice, their coughing into their sleeve, they keep their physical distancing, washing their hands, and they proved it because our results are good.
Kennedy may have support in the community, with Mayor Bill Morrow saying today that although Premier Doug Ford isn't entertaining regional openings at this time, discussions are ongoing with Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Janet DeMille, to see if it's potentially possible, depending on local conditions. Kennedy added that as the situation surrounding COVID-19 has improved throughout the region, it's given the hospital the opportunity to increase some of its services. Starting on Monday, pending provincial approval, it will begin increasing elective surgeries by 25% and increasing scan capacity as they have over 3,000 scans pending. Michael Mahorovich, TBT News.
Premier Doug Ford says he's done taking bullets over the inspections of Ontario long-term care homes. Today, the Premier disclosed that the reason inspections of many homes had been done over the phone and not in person was because unionized inspectors refused to enter the facilities at the height of the pandemic. Colin DeMello has more.
As the situation in Ontario's long-term care homes began to worsen, the government suddenly lost its eyes and ears into the crisis. Premier Doug Ford says provincial inspectors refused to step foot inside infected homes during the entire month of April.
I understand they were scared. This is in April. This was the peak of COVID, and all heck was breaking loose, and they were nervous about their families. They were worried about their health.
The union says, however, inspectors didn't refuse to go to work. They were instead directed by the managers of those homes not to enter because they could not guarantee personal protective equipment for the inspectors. And advocates for elder care say the Ford government was blind to the problem even before the pandemic hit because the government, they say, scaled back comprehensive, unannounced inspections in 2019.
This information about the challenges in long-term care is not new. And if they have any shock, it may be because they stopped doing the thorough inspections.
After a month of negotiations, however, inspectors agreed to go back into the long-term care homes at the beginning of May and will now be embedded in 5 of the homes that the military said had deplorable conditions. The premier also took on the owners of for-profit nursing homes today, calling the owners greedy.
They failed, and I would expect, as a shareholder, to start holding the CEO and the chair accountable.
Nearly 60% of long-term care homes in Ontario are privately owned. 3 corporations are listed on the stock exchange.
And nothing drives me more crazy than these big corporations say, no, we're watching dollars and cents. There's a lot we can do. Number one, we can pull their license. Then they won't have to have a home to worry about.
Advocates say the province needs to hold homes financially accountable with large fines for those who put profit over people.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says she was horrified but not overly surprised by the troubling report from Canadian military members that were stationed in some long-term care homes in Ontario and Quebec. She's now working with her provincial counterparts to very quickly make changes to protect seniors. And while the Thunder Bay MP doesn't believe there's the same level of neglect here locally as was outlined in that report, Hajdu acknowledges there are problems all across the sector.
There are still challenges, and they often come to, they are often related to not having enough bodies, enough hands on deck. Care is provided, absolutely, but can people nurture people emotionally and spiritually? Probably not. Do people have time to actually deal with the effects of loneliness and isolation that we know also accelerate people's poor health and death? Probably not in some cases. And so I think, Thunder Bay is doing well. The region is doing well in terms of protecting the lives of seniors. But I think everybody could say that there could be much more enrichment for people that are living in some of the homes in our region as well as across the country.
The final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls was released close to 1 year ago. But now Indigenous groups across the country are sounding the alarm as a national action plan stemming from the report's findings appears to be delayed. The inquiry detailed the daily situation and circumstances that many Indigenous females face, which can lead to disappearances or deaths. The final report was issued on June 3rd of 2019, with many, including NAN Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, expecting the National Action Plan to be released around its first anniversary. In a media release, Fiddler expressed disappointment with the situation, saying the report was shelved just like we feared. Local MP Patty Hajdu helped oversee the hearings when she was Minister for the Status of Women. She's no longer a part of the discussions on the action plan, but says it's likely been held up as her government awaits input from proper groups who deserve to be heard.
A national report of that sort of magnitude, I would want to make sure that people who needed to have a voice in whether or not they approved of the report, it captured what they felt needed to be in the report. I wouldn't want to release it piecemeal and not be certain that people had had an opportunity to say their piece, because ultimately at the end of the day, if you do that, then you're assuming that you have consent.
The final report had 231 calls for justice, including reform of policing and the justice system, the elimination of gender discrimination, and changes to the Indigenous child welfare system. Fiddler says he will be keeping a close eye on the federal government as they await the National Action Plan and make sure the plan is done right. The president of the union representing local Bombardier workers says he's pleased the company is looking far and wide for contracts to help sustain the Thunder Bay plant. This after it was announced yesterday that Bombardier has been awarded a contract to build 28 bi-level cars for a transit authority in Seattle. Ryan Benazzo has a reaction.
The $108 million U.S. contract to build 28 bi-level cars for Sound Transit out of Seattle, Washington, won't bring laid-off employees back to Thunder Bay's Bombardier plant. It won't even, on its own, prevent more layoffs. But it's a good start, and it secures some work for the plant once all of the Toronto GO trains currently being built are out the door by the end of the year.
Bombardier has followed through on his promise to overturn every stone.
Unifor Local 1075 President Dominic Pasqualino says it's good to have the Seattle-based Transit Authority's business back after Bombardier supplied it with rail cars 20 years ago.
We're excited about them buying our cars again. They're very happy with the service of the cars that we've had there before. And if we looked at all the other rail authorities that we purchased in the past, even if we get a few from each one, that would be good for our plant.
Even after Bombardier let go 500 employees late last year, the plant is still a major contributor to the local economy, says Chamber of Commerce President Charla Robinson.
Not only for the plant itself, but all of the suppliers, right? There's a huge supply chain to even, down to providing the cafeteria services in the plant for the workers, all the supplies that are sourced locally to keep the operation running. So yeah, the more we can keep that going and the more people we can keep employed, it's just so positive for our community.
Large contracts out of Toronto are still the key to sustaining the local plant long term. Bombardier is still waiting to hear whether it'll be awarded a contract to build at least 60 new LRT streetcars for the Toronto Transit Commission.
Hopefully in the next few weeks or months there'll be an answer for that, and that's one that we all have our eye on.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Most of the daycares around Thunder Bay remain closed during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, 2 local child care centers have been open for over a month as part of a provincial initiative to help essential workers who have young children. The Schoolhouse Play Care Center on Gray Street in West Fort and the Algoma Child Care Center near St. Joseph's Hospital reopened in early April. Only the children and the staff are allowed inside the building, although they're all spending as much time outdoors as possible and following the advice of local health authorities to ensure a safe and clean environment. Algoma Program Supervisor Jenna Rogozinski says so far everything is working well with all the new restrictions.
The children have been fantastic. We weren't sure how it was going to be coming into a new place where their families weren't allowed to come in, but they've really made an easy transition into the program, and they're really grateful for it. They made a sign the other day thanking all the frontline essential workers, and just from the bottom of our hearts, we know that we thank them, and it's just so appreciative that the children are just wonderful.
The Algoma Daycare has an on-site cleaner who is constantly sanitizing all toys and play areas to ensure safety for staff and children. Anyone who is an essential worker can apply for a spot in the daycare centers through the DSAB. However, right now they are at full capacity. The Thunder Pride Association has joined the Pride Lives Here campaign from the Fort Frances area. They're also getting ready to host a series of online events which will replace the Pride Parade and other activities canceled during the pandemic. The Pride Lives Here campaign comes just a few days after Town Council in Emo once again turned down a motion to declare June as Pride Month. The signs that have appeared in Fort Frances will be available in Thunder Bay this Sunday afternoon at the Bay Village Coffee parking lot for a suggested $5 donation. Meanwhile, June 1st marks the beginning of the first ever Pride Month in Thunder Bay. Chair Jason Veltri says he's very excited about what's to transpire within the local LGBT community.
Yeah, so we launched our event calendar yesterday, and we're really excited to have actually the largest Pride we've ever had in terms of events. There's over 25 events planned over the month of June. It's the first Pride Month in Thunder Bay. It's always been Pride Week. And it's just going to be online. It's going to be virtual. We're not going to be able to celebrate as a community together, but we're going to do that in the best way possible online and sharing those messages and stories together.
Well, Cole, talk about a bounce back. You look at this morning, little wet, little